Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Good evening. Welcome to your Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Percy Dehne. This is your weather for September 5th, 2017. Now, starting off with hazards tonight, we have quite a few. Starting off with the Anchorage Bowl here, we have a high wind advisory, not advisory, but a warning. It's going to be in effect from 10 p.m. this evening through 7 a.m. tomorrow. And look for, that's going to be for Eagle River, Eklutna, as well as Indian. And with that, the turning and arm winds will start picking up, and they'll be anywhere from southeast 30 to 50 with gusts to 80 miles per hour. And then on the lower hill side, they won't be as gusty, but still up to 60 miles per hour. And then the rest of the Anchorage Bowl, look for a possible gust up to 45 miles per hour. And then we have a high wind warning basically all along the eastern Alaskan range here, as well as Delta Junction and Tanana Flats. And that's extending all the way down through the McGrath region or the upper Kuskokwim Valley. And that's going to be from 10 p.m. this evening to 10 p.m. for Wednesday. And with that, look for southerly winds 25 to 45 miles per hour with gusts to 70 miles per hour. And then in the yellow, we have a high wind advisory, that is. That's for the central interior from Tanana extending northward to Bettles or the upper Koryakuk Valley. And that'll be for midnight tonight till noon tomorrow. And with that, you look for easterly winds 15 to 25 miles per hour with gusts to 40 miles per hour. Then putting the satellite in the loop here, we have a strong included system that's pushing up into the Gulf here, right through the Kodiak and Kenai region through the Barren Islands. With that, plenty of moisture being streamed up into the northern coastal communities as well as central interior, all the way up to the Arctic village. And then putting a loop in again, we have the next included system here that's sitting over here just north of Shemya. And with that southeasterly flow, plenty of cloud cover that's covering pretty much all of the Bering in the chain as well. Farther north, we have high pressure dominating as well the last weeks here with over the Beaufort Sea. So with that, you have easterly flow, and then you have cloud cover with that region there. You do have a little bit of open slot here along the eastern Bering Sea, extending up into the Norton Sound region. Otherwise, that's going to be it for this region. This will fill in as this low pressure system moves eastward. For the southeast, there's high pressure dominating just south of Hattaway here. So rid to high pressure extending up through the lower southeast panhandle. But with this front that's going to swing through, that this evening, cloud cover will be the predominant feature there and some light rain. So look for conditions to worsen over the southeast panhandle. Then otherwise, for the next couple days, again, this low continues to move to the north, and with that, plenty of cloud cover and rain, heavy rain that's occurring over the southeast and the northern coastal communities. For today's weather, here's that strong 983 millibar occluded system I was mentioning that's going over the Barren Islands region. Occluded front extending along the Alaska range as well as the Anchorage Bowl region. Over the southeast, you have that warm front that's pushing on shore basically from Sitka northwesterly through Yakutat region. With that, you're going to have a swath of moisture with this cold front, and that's going to swing through later on. So with that, you'll have some light rain that's going to occur over the southeast. Otherwise, you have a inverted trough extending through the eastern Brooks Range, and with that, strong southeasterly winds and southerly winds will occur over the Alaska Range. With that, farther north, you have the high pressure I mentioned before, and with that cloud cover extending through the northwest coastline there, so some fog, light drizzle, and light rain with that. Otherwise, some clear skies along the northwest territory, Seward Peninsula, extending the western Brooks Range, as well as down into the YK-Delta region. Farther out west, here's that 978 millibar occluded system that's moving along, parallel along with the chain there, the western Aleutians. With that, you have a occluded front extending through most of the bearing with that southeasterly flow. Plenty of moisture wrapping around this system, so you'll have continued light rain and the stronger winds on the backside as you get northwesterly flow and scattered showers. Out ahead of it, you're going to have a southwesterly flow, southerly, and you'll have some light rain with that. For tonight's forecast, the occluded low pressure system will move farther. It'll move into the lower Kuskokwim Valley region with the warm front pushing through into the Alaska range, the eastern Alaska range that is. Over the southeast, you have a high pressure still dominating the lower portions of the southeast panhandle, but again, this front will push in through, continue onshore flow, so light rain with for basically from Sitka northward. And over the Bering, that occluded low pressure system will continue to move eastward, and it'll weaken as it moves eastward and continue to fill. With that, continued moisture wrapping around it, some scattered showers out ahead of it, and light rain. Otherwise, farther north, high pressure still dominating over the Bering Sea. You're going to have a sweet little spot in here, a dry weather here over the basically from Dead Horse all the way over to Selawik region. And over the Wales portion, you'll have some light rain. Otherwise, over the northwest or Barrow region, you'll have some light rain and some fog in that region there. And then Wednesday forecast, the occluded low pressure system sitting over the YK Delta would continue to fill. The occluded front will extend along the Brooks Range and gradually fall apart there. But otherwise, you'll have a southeasterly flow, plenty of moisture being pushed up along the Brooks Range and North Slope region. So plenty of moisture there for that. Always through the Bering, all extending down to the central Bering, you'll have scattered showers with that, with a continued northerly flow. And along the chain, basically over the Dutch region, you're going to have the occluded system as it moves eastward. Actually, that's AKwx, but Dutch is over here with the occluded system, the front moving through. So with that, continued showers and light rain out ahead of it. Over the southeast, that cold front will push through, scattered showers with that, and this is for Wednesday's forecast. You're going to have a chance for an isolated thunderstorm over the Gulf here with an upstream trough that's going to push up in through the afternoon. Otherwise, the southeast, south central region, I should say, you're going to have a continued onshore flow there and some light scattered rain showers. There will be a downsloping drier effect over the Anchorage Bowl, extending up and through the Matsu Valley region. Thursday's forecast, that occluded system will continue to move eastward just south of the Alaska Peninsula with a occluded front extending through the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak region. Over the southeast panhandle, you have that warm front that's going to be pushing up into the Gulf. With that, plenty of moisture that's going to be pushed up into the southeast panhandle as well as northern coastal communities, and that'll continue to filter on through to the central interior. And that other occluded system will continue to fill and weaken. That's sitting over the Seward Peninsula region with that occluded front that's falling apart, and that's going to be over the Brooks Range. Have a tighter gradient, so look for strong easterly winds here along the Arctic coastline. Otherwise, along pretty much the Bering, most of the Bering, you're going to have light drizzle and rain and some fog. Again, as this high pressure builds into the western Aleutians and that ridge extends into the western Bering, look for stratus to build as well as the fog issues. Temperatures as 1 p.m. Starting off in the southeast panhandle, pretty much all in the 60s. You did have a high of 73 there at Kloak, a little warmer at 79 at Seward, British Columbia, and Sitka came in at 68, and Yakutat was at 69. Over the Anchorage Bowl, the coolest temperature was 47. That was at Portage. Anchorage came in at 50, Palmer at 52, and then Talkeetna at 60. Going down to southeast panhandle, you had Homer coming in at 52, Kodiak as well as 52. And then for the central interior region, you're pretty much all in the mid-50s. Farther north, from Brooks Range south, northward that is, the coolest temperatures, not quite as cool, but still through Anaktuvuk and Fort Yukon 48. The coolest temperature there again was at Barrow coming in at 39 and 37 at Dead Horse. Going along northwest, you had Cape Lisdorm coming in at 50, and then Wainwright at 46. Going on through, you have Tin City at 45, and Gamble coming in at 44. And at 1 p.m. Along the Alaska Peninsula Aleutian range, pretty much all in the lower 50s. You did have a high 61 there, King Salmon, but otherwise Dutch came in at 50 as St. Paul came in at 46, 54 at Atka and Adak, and then Shemya came in at 50. Tonight's low temperatures, not surprising, again, the coolest temperature is going to be along the Brooks Range and Arctic slope there, again with that high pressure dominating and easterly flow, cooler air being pumped in there. So Anaktuvuk Pass will be coming in at 33. Otherwise, the southeast panhandle, with a high pressure dominating the ridge over here, over this south of Hattagwai here, you're going to, that's why your low temperatures are still pretty high. They're going to be pretty much in the upper 50s, 58 there at AKwx. And then along the Aleutian chain here, much in the upper 40s, 50s at the Adak and Atka, lowest ones being at 44, lower 40s there at St. Paul. Then high temperatures tomorrow, again with this fluid system that's moving in, that's pushing through warmer temperatures. 70 will be coming in there at the Fairbanks region. Otherwise, farther north, again, that cooler air, easterly flow, that's why you have the cooler temperatures up there. 47 Anaktuvuk, Kaktovik, 45, 43 at Barrow. The southeast panhandle, primarily all in the upper, mid 60s to upper 67 there at AKwx, 62 at Sitka. And then along the chain, pretty much all in the mid 50s. Flying weather for tomorrow morning, you're going to have IFR to marginal VFR conditions pretty much all the whole bearing as that occluded system continues to move eastward. Then along the southeast panhandle with that front pushing on in, you're going to have worse conditions IFR along the outer waters here, or the coastline, and then extending up into the, the Lynn Canal region. Otherwise, IFR conditions pretty much all along northern coastal communities, extending over into the Prince William Sound region as well as the eastern Kenai. And then look for along the Alaska-Aleutian range, you're going to have the worst IFR conditions there with conditions along that region I mentioned. And then also marginal VFR conditions for the lower and Kuskokwim Valley. Farther north, again, with that front that's going to be pushing up in this region and falling apart, you're going to have, with the high pressure, you're going to have IFR and marginal VFR conditions pretty much over the north slope and Arctic coastline. Then for tomorrow afternoon, as the system, the cooler system continues to move eastward, again, your worst conditions are going to be pretty much over the eastern Bering and central to eastern Aleutian. So a little open hole window here along the just north of Alaska Peninsula there on the Bering side, extending into Bristol Bay. Farther north, again, the same condition. You have the cooler front that's going to be weakening up in this region here along the Brooks Range, so that's your worst conditions here. And again, combining with that easterly flow and high pressure, plenty of moisture being pumped in there and cooler. So some low stratus and fog there. The southeast panhandle, you're going to have IFR, marginal VFR conditions, pretty much the same conditions. Might slightly move farther inland, but again, your worst conditions will remain. There will be a chance for isolated thunderstorms in the afternoon in the eastern Gulf region as well. And your IFR, marginal VFR conditions will continue along the northern coastal communities as well, extending into the eastern side of Anchorage. Tomorrow's passes conditions, Anaktuvuk, IFR to marginal VFR conditions, Edigan, IFR to marginal VFR conditions, Merrill and Lake Clark, IFR conditions, rainy IFR conditions, windy marginal VFR conditions, Isabel MVFR, Mentaska MVFR, Tanita MVFR, Portage IFR MVFR, Chillicook and White IFR. And then tomorrow morning's freezing levels, your lowest conditions again are going to be in the Bering, 6,000 feet. But as you go farther north, it's still 4,000 to 6,000 as you go with the cooler air being filtered in from the north. Otherwise, the southeast will have your higher freezing levels with that high pressure dominating the southeast panhandle extending just south of Hattagwai. So you're going to have freezing levels anywhere from 8,000 to 14,000. Then as you go over the Anchorage Bowl and along the Alaska Range, 6,000 to 8,000 there. Over the Brooks Range, you will have a few pockets of freezing levels at the surface over the mountains over the Brooks Range. And then tomorrow's icing, you're going to have light to occasional widespread moderate with this occluded system along the western Aleutians extending to Adak with that system as it moves eastward. Otherwise, the southeast above 9,000, light to isolated moderate, and that's with that front that's pushing in. Over the Anchorage Bowl, you'll have light to occasional widespread. That's over the Anchorage Bowl, Kenai, and extending up into the lower and Kuskokwim Valley, as well as portions of the lower Koyukuk Valley, upper Koyukuk Valley, that is. Then along the YK Delta, extending up just east of the Stewart Peninsula into the Brooks Range, you'll have above 7,000 in that region there. That's light, occasional widespread, moderate. And then tomorrow's jet stream, you have a strong subtropical jet, 110 knots, 110 knots as it goes eastward, and then it digs down at the long base of the long wave trough here, then transitions more to southeasterly, again 105 knots over the Anchorage Bowl. Then it transitions to westerly flow as you get through the eastern portions of the Beaufort Sea, 80, and it strengthens to 145 knots there. Again, here's that high pressure that is dominating over the lower 48 in the southeast panhandle. There is a finger of a jet with this low over the western side of the Beaufort Sea or the lower Chukchi Sea. And that's northwesterly flow, 80 knots there. Tomorrow's 9,000 foot winds. You got these double barrel lows, one sitting over the YK Delta region and one sitting over the central Aleutians. Both of them are going to be 30 to 50 knots southerly flow out ahead of this system, 50 knots going over the Anchorage Bowl, again with this strong occluded front that's moving in. On the backside, 20 to 35 knots coming down the Bering. Otherwise, the strongest winds with this occluded system down here are going to be on the base of the low. That's westerly 40 to 50 knots, and then on the backside, 25 to 15. Southeast, not surprising, with that high pressure ridge dominating pretty much the southeast panel in the lower 48. Southerly, southwesterly flow 20 knots. It starts strengthening a little bit to 45 to 50 as you get closer to Hattagwai region. Otherwise, they all taper off as you go interior to 25 knots westerly flow. And then tomorrow's 3,000 foot winds, again, you're going to have these double barrel lows here. You're going to have cyclonic flow. Strongest winds over here over the southwest territory and the northern coastal communities, southerly 30 knots. Then on the backside, 15 knots. And then along the Brooks Range, you do have a stronger finger of winds here that are northeasterly 35 knots. Again, weak flow, northeasterly flow, 20 knots through the Bering. The strongest winds are going to be on the just south of the chain with this low westerly 45 to 30 knots. Then the southeast panhandle, pretty much all southwesterly flow, high pressure dominating, so 15 to 20 knots, and it continues at the same speed as you go into the interior. And then tomorrow's turbulence over the Seward Peninsula, extending up into along the Brooks Range here, below 5,000, light to occasional widespread moderate, as well as the southwest Alaska Range extending up to the lower and upper Kuskokwim Valley, as well as the upper Koyukuk Valley. And along the Alaska Range, you'll have below 5,000, light to occasional widespread moderate. And then over the lower, the outside waters of the southeast panhandle, you have below 5,000, light to occasional widespread moderate icing, turbulence. And then of course also the isolated thunderstorms tomorrow in the eastern Gulf. And then below 5,000 there are the western Aleutian south, basically extending down to the northern Pacific, light to occasional widespread moderate. And with that, we'll be back with the rest of your forecast.
Well, you have to love boats, and you have to love water, and you have to love Alaska, and you have to be a good boat operator, and you have to like it. And then you have to like people. So there's a number of factors that go into what makes up a water taxi operator. My name's Mako Haggerty. That's Mako like taco.
Good morning. What's going on? Yeah, good, yeah.
I live here in Homer, Alaska. I've lived here since 1982. That's 32 years. I came up here, I was a commercial fisherman, and then I got into water taxiing here in Kachemak Bay in 1996. And I've been doing the water taxi ever since. There's no such thing as a typical day. And there's no such thing as a typical day in commercial fishing. And there's no such thing as a typical day in water taxi, which is why becoming a water taxi operator was so easy for me and difficult for others, is because it's not a 9-to-5 job. A lot of people aren't mariners, so they don't understand why maybe I would do this all the time. Maybe only pick the nice days. But I actually like being out there on the rough days too. It's challenging, exciting, and fun. If you're just running a boat on flat, calm water all the time, that can be maybe a little bit boring. So every condition out there on the water I find to be enjoyable. I guess in the back of our mind, there's always danger, but I guess something could always happen. It's not something we focus on. I wanted to be a service to the people that live here. And that's basically, I think, what we've become. There's only two ways across the bay. One's by boat and one's by air. And if they can't fly into places like Seldovia, then the water taxi is the next alternative. There are people that are afraid of flying. There are people that have a lot of gear. Planes don't go everywhere. In fact, airplanes and even float planes are fairly limited in some of the places that they can access, and boats can access more places. We can pack more gear. And then, of course, there's the people that would rather take a boat than fly in a plane. Of course I've got fears. In fact, I would say that probably running boats was facing one of my fears. You know, drowning is, yeah, I do. Yeah, I would say that it's a, yeah, reoccurring dream, actually. I spend my entire life on the water, so that's probably just natural.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
During the summer, I'll take a lot of visitors across the bay to the park, and it'll be a bright, sunny summer day, and the water will be blue, and we might even see a whale crossing the bay, and people will come up to me and they'll tell me I have the best job ever. And I think that sometimes I do. But there are days that we go out there and we're battling the weather, the waves. We've got people on the other side of the bay that absolutely need to be picked up. So it's not a matter of choice whether or not we cross the bay. So sometimes I'll have people actually say, boy, your job sucks. Happiness is different for everybody, but yesterday I was out in the boat with some photographers, and the sun was out and the weather was really nice, and it was still winter, and we anchored up and got just some fantastic wildlife pictures there yesterday, and I realized there was no other place I'd rather be.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, starting off with your sea ice analysis, that's for September 5th. Pretty much the lower Chukka Sea and the Beaufort Sea remains open waters. The sea ice that's farther north, that'll continue to melt, but otherwise it's pretty much going to remain stationary. Wednesday's marine forecast for southeast. The inside waters, you're going to have a southeast flow more southerly there as you get to Lynn Canal. That's, again, 10 to 15 knots. Wave height's 2 to 3 feet. The outside waters, primarily all southerly to southeasterly, except for you get just near Gustavus, you're going to have northwesterly flow 10 knots. But otherwise, from Yakutat westward to Cordova, you have southerly flow at 10 to 15 knots. And your wave heights on the outside waters are going to remain, are going to range in from 8 to 11 feet. And then Thursday for your southeast forecast, the inside waters pretty much the same things. Southerly flow 10 to 15 knots, a little stronger as you get farther north in the Lynn Canal, 20 knots there. Otherwise, outside waters, southwesterly flow, and then permanently all southerly flow. Small craft winds as you get farther near Cordova region there. Otherwise, wave heights will be 6 to 7 feet. And then for Wednesday marine forecast for south central, you're going to have small craft winds here, southeasterly going into Prince William Sound, southerly on the eastern Kenai, extending down there to the northern portions of the Kodiak. Otherwise, the inside waters, you're going to have the bearings southerly 30 knots, and then gale forces you get there past Homer, the southern Cook Inlet. The northern Cook Inlet, they'll be southeasterly 30 knots. And then south central for Thursday, primarily all easterly flow 15 knots, pretty weak. Then down the inlet, northeasterly flow 10 knots and 15 as you get down through the Bering Strait region. And then Wednesday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, on the Bering side, you have southwesterly 20 knots and then southeasterly 15 as you get there towards Cold Bay on the Bering side. Otherwise, on the Pacific side, pretty much all southerly 15 knots, a little stronger near Kodiak through Chillicothe Strait, southerly 25 knots. And then wave heights are going to be 10 knots there. 10 feet that is, there sitting off southeast of the Kodiak Island. And then Thursday, marine forecast for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, pretty much all 15 knots, easterly flow, northeast through Shelikof, and then northerly flow as you get down through the Shumigan Islands region. Otherwise, on the Bering side, northeast flow extending through the Bristol Bay region, and then just north of Cold Bay region, you're going to have northerly flow at 20 knots. Wave heights will range anywhere from 3 to 5 on the Bering side, and then 4 to 8 feet on the Pacific side. And then Alaska marine forecast for Wednesday for Aleutian chain. I'll step out of the picture here a little bit. As you can see near Dutch, you're going to have southeasterly flow 20 knots. And then we start shifting again with this occluded system that's moving in. So northeasterly as you get north of Adak. And then on the back side, you're going to have gale force winds here, 35 knots, basically from Shemya eastward. And then your higher winds and waves are going to be, I should say at least wave height's going to be on the Pacific side south of Atka. And you're going to have a southwesterly fetch there, flow of 25 to 30 knots. And then for Thursday marine forecast, predominantly all northerly for the Bering along the chain there, northwesterly there from Shemya. Along the Dutch region, you're going to have northwesterly flow 20 knots. And then for the Wednesday marine forecast for the west coast, you're probably going to have northerly flow, small craft winds. It becomes northwesterly flow coming into the Kuskokwim Bay region, and then easterly flow through St. Paul. And then Thursday marine forecast, probably all northerly, 20-25 knots, and then northwesterly there for the Pribilos. And then along the Arctic coastline, again, the high pressure region dominating there, you have easterly flow, small craft, and then it becomes all northerly going through the Bering Strait. And then Thursday marine forecast, all small craft again, but strong easterly flow, 30 knots, then transitions to northerly flow as you go through the Bering Strait region. And then tonight's forecast, here's that strong occluded low pressure system sitting over the lower Kuskokwim Delta region, not Delta region, but Kuskokwim Bay region. And then with that, you're going to have occluded front with that, warm front extending through the central interior here. So plenty of moisture being pumped in and strong winds in this region here, and the next occluded system over the western Aleutians. With that, we'll see you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.